Welcome back to another TerranScapes video. I've already shot this video and I didn't like the first one, so I'm shooting it again. The topic for today is to further explore and review the products from the Hot Wire Foam Factory, which is a company that specializes in products for working with foam, extruded polystyrene foam, for cutting it, coating it, protecting it, crafting with it. They have a whole variety of tools, and I've already done a couple videos showing you a couple of the tools they sent me and some of the products. Since those videos, I've furthered done some experiments with a couple of the products that I wanted to share with you today, and give you some ideas about some of the properties of them and some ways that they can be used and further explored. So let's take a closer look at these and get into more detail. So basically today we're looking at these three products. The foam coat is the powder that you mix with water, which forms like a gypsum cement that will coat the foam to protect it. The boost is a product that you add to the foam coat and water to strengthen it and add some what they call stickiness to it, but it definitely bonds to the foam a lot more aggressively. And the bounce, which is a coating that can be used on its own or mixed with the foam coat in order to add some resilience to the foam and apply the foam coat in a thinner amount to get the same kind of protection. But as a real quick aside, before I show you those, I should also mention the Foam Fusion. Foam Fusion is their adhesive, and the adhesive is an interesting one. It looks a lot like white glue PVA, but it definitely has an odor that tells you it's not entirely just plain PVA. And as I did on a previous video, a little experiment, it definitely is more aggressive in terms of bonding to the foam. But one of the questions that came up was regarding the shrinking of it, or the warping that glues can produce. So I did a quick experiment using the Foam Fusion, using the bounce, to take a look at the warping that the glues would produce on a relatively thin material. Now, if you're... Wait a minute, I'm looking for my white glue sample here. Here we go. All right. So what I did is I took a, I don't know, what is this, maybe 12 inches long, ballpark, piece of foam core, which is about 3/16 of an inch thick, I think. And I drew the same circle on all of my boards, filled that circle with the glue, and then spread that out with a brush to coat the entire surface. And you can see here that it produces a pretty significant warp in the piece. Mainly this is due, if you're not sure what's going on there, any glue, well, I shouldn't say any glue, most glues have a carrier in them, some kind of a solvent. When that solvent leaves, in the case of white glue, it's water. When that leaves, the actual material gets smaller in volume, and so it shrinks, and so it pulls inward on itself, and that causes the warping. Here's the white glue. Now what I wanted to do is use that as the standard and compare all the other things to it. So there's the white glue. And then I did wood glue, same amount on the board, pretty much the same amount of warping. Then I did the Foam Fusion. Whoops, I originally thought it was bounce. It's Foam Fusion here. And pretty much same warpage. And then I did the bounce. Oh, bounce. There we go. And same amount and the same warpage. So these products, when used on thin materials, you can expect the same kind of warping that you get with traditional PVAs or wood glues. Something to be aware of when you're using them. I've seen a lot of people who've used foam core as a base for their display boards, because then they can cut into it very easily, and then they can have their figures sit flush with the surface, which looks really nice, and I've seen a lot of professional boards done that way. But they've often attached their sand or surface block with glue, and then the entire material warps. One way to combat that, although it's not a perfect fix, is to just apply the same adhesive to the other side, and when that shrinks, that will also pull, and it should straighten it quite a bit. So, little trick to try, but I don't recommend using those kinds of adhesives on these materials because of that warping problem. If you're going to do large flat areas, that's what we're talking about here, large flat areas. Glues that are solid-based, like hot glue guns, because there we go, hot glue. But because the material in the glue never loses anything, right? So when you heat this up, it liquefies, and then when it dries, it returns to its original state and has a very low amount of shrinkage, so you don't get that kind of warping when you use hot glues. Not that you should use a hot glue for flocking, but I'm just trying to show you a comparison. A lot of bookbinders will use glues that don't have any kind of solvent in them because of that very reason. When you're working with paper, it tends to warp it pretty severely if it has a solvent. So that was my first experiment. Second experiment I wanted to do was to do take a look at the bounce. So what I did is I took the hot wire engraver that I've shown in a previous video, and I carved a variety of things into this piece of foam. A little logo for myself, a little nod to the hot wire foam factory. I did a little sort of pseudo brickwork, a deeper carve using the hot tool, a little bit of a deeper gouge, and then I did some really fine sort of dark elf symbols on the side over here, just to see if I did a really shallow cut, how it would coat that and retain the actual surface texture. Then I applied the bounce, straight strength, and I tried to mop up the the bounce from the text and pull that out so that it wouldn't sag. And then I waited for that to dry, and I scraped off, just as a little comparison, I scraped off the brush on the back to really build up a layer, just so I could see what super thick layers were like. Then I applied a second coat, I let that dry, and decided to take a look at it. Well, I think overall it's done a pretty good job of retaining the surface features. If used lightly, and although this was a thorough coverage, it didn't really bead very much, as I had mentioned before, and I'll talk more about that beading in a second, but it does retain the surface texture. I was almost hoping it would hide a couple of the little hairs that are produced. See if I can show you that up close. I don't know if that's going to show up in the video. Maybe. But when you work with a hot wire tool, oftentimes, because it melts the foam, and the foam, when you pull away, it will pull hairs, little angel hairs, off of the material. And those can, you know, be unsightly, especially if you're trying to replicate something like stone or the similar. So it kind of covers them a little bit, which I was mostly interested in this sort of brick wall thing here. But I don't know, a little cleaning with a stiff brush might be a good idea before coating it. Just try to help reduce the number of hairs in it. Overall, though, it does afford some measure of protection. Pushing into it, the foam tends to want to rebound somewhat. You are limited by the material's properties underneath, and so once the foam is crushed to a certain degree, there's no real reboundability that's going to restore it to perfect, because the foam beneath it has been, really damaged. But I would say it does improve its strength overall, and it's a great way to do a quick surface coat that isn't going to obscure detail, but protect it if you were going to use, say, like spray paints or something like that. I have plans to paint this piece coming down the road, maybe for the next video, with some aggressive solvents to see how much it protects it, and so we can take a look at that in more detail later. But I think overall, with a good application, it's going to do very well. But then I got an email from Chelsea, I believe. I hope I have her name right. I don't have my email in front of me. Who works for the Hot Wire Foam Factory, and they were saying that you can mix the bounce and the foam coat, and you take a little bit of the foam coat, a small amount, mix it into a tiny amount of bounce so that you get a nice paste, then add more bounce to it, and then you can get a liquid that you can that you can spread or apply to this. When I did that, the main reason they say that is it will reduce sagging and give you a better coverage over surfaces maybe that are so smooth it might tend to bead up on it. That made a big improvement, I have to say. I didn't put it over any texture, but it really brushes on without sagging a lot more aggressively. Very nice, and I think it adds just a little bit more protection to it. Overall, I feel... Now, of course, I'm not applying any kind of regular pressure. As a ex-science teacher, it'd be nice to regulate this with, 15 pounds per square inch application to the corners or whatever. I'm not doing that. I mean, I'm just giving it anecdotally, but I really felt like it did add some extra strength and did improve its brushability. So that's something to consider. I then went ahead and said, well, if a little is good, maybe more is better. And I put in quite a bit of boost. I'm sorry, so many products. I put quite a bit of the foam coat into the bounce, mixed that into just sub-paste level, and then applied that. And surprisingly, For a gypsum plaster where you think it would crack if you pressed on it, it resists cracking really well because of that bounce in there. I was pretty surprised, and I'd like to try this at a thicker coat and with even more foam coat in it to see what level you can achieve, but it's an interesting combination that I could see having a lot of use in certain ways, because you get that aggressive, stony exterior that resists the cracking that can happen when you use the foam coat and boost by itself. And let me show you what I'm talking about there. So here's another piece of foam. This is blue foam. Blue foam, pink foam, almost the same thing in properties. I think the blue foam is a little bit spongier than the pink foam, and that's about the only difference I would say between the two of them. So if either you have, is going to be fine for building terrain with. But what I did is I just applied the boost and foam coat, and there's a recipe for that. It's like 3 parts foam coat to 1/2 part water, 1/2 part boost, I think. And you get this cement-like coating, very plaster-like coating on the surface. Once you coat it, and they have instructional videos on their site, you bang it out, and that levels it and gives you a really incredibly smooth surface. You can see lines from the brushes, but overall, I've found it gives a very nice, smooth surface that takes further applications of other materials very well. So then I thought, well, what's this like without the bounce in it? And if I press really hard, and it takes quite a bit, oh yeah, there you go, you can see that it does crack and it spiders outward from the impact. But the interesting thing here is that even though it cracks, unlike PVA, which is a material that I've used for a long time to coat modular boards and terrain, when it cracks, it does not flake off and pop off. That is something that happens with PVA. Once you break its integrity, it tends to pop right off the foam beneath it. And this stuff really, because of that boost in there, it is hard to get off. So you have to envision that if you had flock or other materials over this, when it gets cracked, it is not going to show. You're just going to see a little indent in the surface, and that's going to, that's fine. I mean, that's, land is not flat. So I really felt like this is a great example of just how aggressive the bond is on the boost foam coat combo. Then I decided to show you the way I finally finish it. So I do the same application, boost foam coat combo, and then while it's wet, before I put it on the shelf, I spread sand on it. I use a natural sand. I use a beach sand, or sometimes I'll get friction sand that's used, traction sand, I mean, for in the northern climates, they use it to put under tires to get yourself stuck, unstuck, I should say, from the snow. When I've done that, it's a little bit, what's nice is it has a little bit of a non-uniformity in its particle size, and that just looks a little bit more natural. When you add sand to the boost and the foam coat combo, you get an incredibly strong bond. This is really hard for me to crack. I have to press really hard on it, and let's see if you can hear it. No, I can't. Oh, there we go. Barely. Now it does leave a little dimple. See if I can show that. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. There's a little dimple where my finger's pressed in, but no surface cracking at all. No way that's going to flake off of the board. And so even if somebody drops a heavy miniature on the table or drops their beer on it or something like that, you're not going to have any material coming loose. This is the way I do all of my modular boards now because it's such an improved strengthener. And then on the sides, you can get a sense of the improved durability of the corners, although still, you are working with a foam underneath, and so it only has a limited amount of strength. Unless you want to coat the sides and build this layer up a lot, you're going to be, always subject to a little pucking at the corners if you press hard enough. But again, there's no flaking when you do that, which is something that I had noticed was a problem with my modular boards before, and I would send out little repair kits in case that ever happened. You could quickly touch up those little areas. And I still include the repair kit, but I think it's almost superfluous now because this material just does not let go from the foam. So, that gives you just a little rundown of what I've been looking at with these products, including their warping ability, their general strength, and a little bit about the ways that I use them. The next thing I probably will try to look at is a stronger amount of the foam coat in the bounce. I'd like to see how that does. And I'd like to paint this piece up, see how that works out. And we can, I don't know, I'm going to think about it over the next week or two and think about other areas that I want to explore in terms of how we can use these products to help make terrain making a little bit easier. Oh, and I almost forgot. I also, all right, hold on, looking under the shelf. Here we go. So here's the hot wire engraving tool. I did finally ask what these flanges were for, and I was right. The flanges are designed to radiate away heat so that as it heats up, it doesn't go into the handle and cause any problems. So it's just like a little, literally an air-cooled radiator flange to dissipate some of the heat coming back from the tip. So something, there's a thought on that. If you have questions about these products, or you have something that you'd like to see me test, in fact, the shrink test was a comment made by somebody watching the previous videos. Those kinds of ideas are really helpful for me. So if you see something and you think, ooh, would it work for that? Send me an email, and I'd be happy to try it out for you and include it in the next video update. I just want to take the time to thank the Hot Wire Foam Factory for sending me these products to review. I really think that they're solid products. As I said, I use the Boost in the Foam Coat on all my modular boards now, and it's been a really a nice treat to be able to do some more in-depth experiments with a couple of the products and explore their properties more, so I know what I can do with them in the future to really enhance some of the pieces that I send out. And I think that's a company that's worth taking a look at if you're looking into a hot wire cutting tool or some products to use on top of your foam once you make your gaming table or your hills and the like. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video showing you some other projects and things that are going on in my mind. Until then, take care, and I'll talk to you later.